Hi, I'm Elaine Biagini, and this is Lorraine Kelman. We're going to talk to you about Proposition 1. You'll see it on your ballot as Right to Reproductive Freedom Amendment. It is a legislative constitutional amendment. What is the question behind Proposition 1, Lorraine?
The question is, should the state of California amend the California Constitution to include the right to reproductive freedom, which would include the right to an abortion and the right to choose or refuse contraceptives?
Can you give us a little more background? What is the current situation around this proposition?
Sure. Existing California statutory law under the Reproductive Privacy Act provides that every individual possesses a fundamental right of privacy with respect to personal reproductive decisions.
So how does that apply here?
Currently, in California, every individual has the fundamental right to choose or refuse birth control and to choose to bear a child or to obtain an abortion. And currently, abortion is legal in California up to fetal viability, and after viability, only if the procedure is necessary to protect the life or health of the mother.
Is viability defined by the state currently?
Yes. Viability is defined as the point in gestation when a fetus can survive outside the womb.
So what does Prop 1 propose?
Prop 1 would prohibit the state from denying or interfering with an individual's reproductive freedom in their most intimate decisions, including the right to choose to have an abortion or use contraceptives. Prop 1 would further the constitutional right of privacy and the right not to be denied equal protection.
Does this impact an individual's right to privacy, Lorraine?
No. Prop 1 specifies that nothing contained in the measure narrows or limits the right to privacy or to equal protection.
Is there anything else worth noting?
Yes. The California Constitution is the state's highest law. Only an amendment can change the Constitution. As proposed, Prop 1 would become a constitutional amendment. Any future changes would require a new amendment be put on a future ballot by a 2/3 vote of the legislature for a vote of the people.
What is the fiscal impact of Prop 1?
There is no direct fiscal impact because reproductive rights are already protected by state law.
What do supporters say about Prop 1, Lorraine?
Supporters say California should not sit on the sidelines as unprecedented attacks on the fundamental right to choose endanger women across the country. This measure will ensure that women in our state have an absolute right to a safe and legal abortion that is protected in our Constitution. And supporters also say, we know from history that abortion bans don't end abortion. They only outlaw safe abortions. We must preserve the fundamental reproductive rights of women here in California because they are under attack elsewhere.
And opponents? What are opponents saying?
Opponents say, shouldn't our leaders be asking, how do we render abortion unnecessary? Voters should encourage our leaders to find real solutions to abortion to prevent abortion. And opponents also say, the state's political leadership continues to stubbornly cling to the practice of abortion and the throwaway culture. The language of Proposition 1 is overly vague, reckless, and could further endanger children, especially among the poor and marginalized in our state.
What about campaign financing? How does that look for Prop 1?
In support, $9.8 million has been contributed by Atkins Ballot Measure Committee. Yes, on Proposition 1. The major donors are on your screen. In opposition, $863,000 has been contributed by the California Together No on Prop 1. Again, see the top donors on your screen.
In conclusion, Lorraine, what does a yes vote mean?
A yes vote means that the California Constitution would be changed to expressly include existing rights to reproductive freedom, such as the right to choose whether or not to have an abortion and use contraceptives.
And how about a no vote?
A no vote means that the California Constitution would not be changed to expressly include existing rights to reproductive freedoms. These rights, however, would continue to exist under current state law.
Thank you, Lorraine.
My pleasure, Elaine.
Hello, my name is Leona Judson, and this is Gail Peterson, and we're going to talk to you today about Proposition 26. You'll see on your ballot, it says allows in-person roulette, dice games, sports wagering on tribal lands. It is an initiative constitutional amendment and statute. So Gail, what is the question behind Proposition 26?
The question is, should the state of California amend the state constitution and state law to allow sports wagering at American Indian casinos and licensed racetracks, and legalize roulette and dice games at casinos?
Can you tell us some of the background on Proposition 26?
The California Constitution and state law limits the types of gambling within the state to the state lottery, card rooms, betting on horse racing, and gambling at tribal casinos. There are 4 racetracks, 79 compacted tribes, and 66 casinos in the state. Currently, sports wagering, roulette, and games with dice are not allowed. The Supreme Court eliminated the federal ban on sports wagering in 2018.
How does gambling at American Indian casinos work?
When a tribe wants to offer gambling on its lands, federal law requires that the state negotiate a compact with the tribe with oversight from the California Department of Justice, county district attorneys, and city attorneys.
What do tribal casinos pay now?
Currently, tribes pay $65 million to support state regulation and gambling addiction programs. They pay tens of millions of dollars to local governments each year, and larger casinos pay nearly $150 million each year to tribes that either do not operate casinos or have less than 350 slot machines.
So what does Proposition 26 propose?
Prop 26 would allow tribal casinos and 4 licensed racetracks to offer on-site betting on sports events like football, and would expand the types of games offered at tribal casinos to include roulette and dice games.
Does that include school sports?
No wagering would be allowed on high school sports or California college sports, and it would be limited to those 21 and older.
How will racetracks be affected?
Well, racetracks would have a net 10% tax on sports betting, with revenues going into a new California sports wagering fund. The new fund's monies would first be used to help meet the required spending level on education. After that, the fund would be divided among the general fund, 70%, gambling law enforcement, 15%, gambling addiction and mental health programs, 15%.
And how will Proposition 26 affect tribal casinos?
Well, tribal casinos that choose to offer sports betting on tribal lands would be able to do so only after adjusting their compacts with the state to allow it. Each tribe's state and local compact would be amended to determine the amount of the fees to be paid, and the new compact would determine how funds would be distributed.
And how will violations be handled?
Well, any violations of gaming law would be brought to the district attorney, the attorney general, or to the courts. Civil lawsuits can be brought by citizens. Penalties assessed would go to the new California Sports Wagering Fund.
And what will be the fiscal effect of Proposition 26?
Well, impact on state and local revenues are hard to determine because much depends on the terms of the compacts between the state and the casinos, and on how much people who play the games or bet on sports will spend. Potentially, racetracks tax payments and civil penalties for violations of the law would increase state revenues by tens of millions of dollars. Increased costs to enforce and regulate the new wagering could potentially reach the low tens of millions of dollars each year. This could be offset by increased revenue.
So what are supporters saying?
Well, supporters say Prop 26 would guarantee that children don't have access to sports wagering by limiting it to casinos and racetracks. And supporters also say Prop 26 would limit sports wagering to highly regulated and safe facilities that are experienced in gambling operations and with resources to safely operate the activity.
And what do opponents say?
Well, opponents say Prop 26 would massively expand gambling in California for the benefit of large tribal casinos. Opponents also say Prop 26 is sponsored by powerful interests that will use the new enforcement rules to bury card rooms in frivolous lawsuits.
What about campaign financing? What does that look like?
Well, $73 million has been donated in support by the Yes on 26, No on 27 Coalition for Safe, Responsible Gaming PAC. The top donors to the PAC are on your screen. And in opposition, $41 million has been donated by the No on 26 Taxpayers Against Special Interest Monopolies PAC. And $1 million has also been donated by the No on the Gambling Power Grab PAC. Again, the top donors are on your screen.
So in conclusion, what does a yes vote mean?
The California state constitution will be amended to allow sports wagering in American Indian casinos and at licensed racetracks. It will tax profits from sports wagering at racetracks at 10% and legalize roulette and dice games at casinos.
And what does a no vote mean?
A no vote opposes this initiative, thus continuing to prohibit sports betting in California and roulette and dice games at tribal casinos.
Well, thank you, Gail, for walking us through this very complicated proposition.
You're welcome, Leona.
Hi, I'm Anthony O'Connor with Sonoma State University, and this is Jana Cosgrove with the Sonoma League of Women Voters, and we are going to talk to you about Proposition 27. You'll see it on your ballot as allows online and mobile sports wagering outside tribal lands. It is an initiative, constitutional amendment, and statute. So, what is the question behind Proposition 27?
The question is, should there be a constitutional amendment and statute that allows online and mobile sports betting outside of tribal land in the state of California for those 21 and older?
What is Prop 27's current situation?
Anthony, good question. The California Constitution and statutes limit gambling to the California lottery, card rooms, betting on horses, and gambling in the American Indian-owned casinos that have an agreement or a compact between the tribe and the state. Sports betting is not legal in California. California currently has compacts with 79 tribes, and tribes currently operate 66 casinos in 28 counties.
And what do tribes pay currently?
Currently, tribes pay $65 million to support state regulatory and gambling addiction program costs, tens of millions of dollars to local governments each year, and tribes operating larger casinos pay nearly $150 million each year to tribes that either do not operate casinos or have less than 350 slot machines.
What does Prop 27 propose?
Anthony, Proposition 27 would change the California Constitution and state law to allow online sports betting over the internet and mobile devices. It would allow adults 21 or older to bet on sports events online, including college sports and other events such as award shows. The bettor would not need to be at a casino to place the bet.
Would school sports be involved?
No betting would be allowed on high school sports.
How would online gaming companies be involved?
Prop 27 would enable large established gambling companies to offer online sports betting under the tribe's name and branding. These gaming companies must strike a deal with a state compacted tribe to operate in California. There would be some limitation on tribal rights and which gambling companies can participate.
Would there be any regulation?
Yes, Proposition 27 would create a new division to regulate online sports betting that would operate within the state's Justice Department. Fines from illegal gambling would go into a new fund, the California Online Sports Betting Trust Fund.
Are there other revenues involved?
Yes, in addition to fees on penalties, the new fund would collect revenues from a one-time licensing fee of $10 million from each tribe to the state with a renewal fee of $1 million every 5 years. A one-time licensing fee of $100 million from gambling corporations to the state with a renewal fee of $10 million every 5 years. And finally, a 10% tax on all companies or tribes involved in sports betting. Taxes based on gross amount minus payouts for winning bets, promotional fees, and federal gambling taxes.
Then where would the fund revenues go?
The new fund would pay state regulatory costs. After that, 85% of the remaining funds would be allocated to a new California Solutions to Homelessness and Mental Health Support Fund for permanent and interim housing. 15% of the revenues for tribes not involved in online and mobile sports betting would go to the Tribal Economic Development Account for tribal government, public health, education, infrastructure, and economic development.
Is there anything else?
Yes, the new fund would be seeded by a $30 million loan from the State General Fund to be repaid within 5 years.
What would the fiscal effects be?
Anthony, the fiscal effects would depend on how many licensed entities offer sports betting and the amount of expenses they subtract from the monthly amount owed to the state. Plus, the fiscal effects would depend on the number of people who choose to make sports bets. Therefore, increased state revenues could be in the hundreds of millions of dollar range and would probably not exceed $500 million, with increased regulatory costs in the mid-tens of millions of dollars.
What do supporters say?
Supporters say this measure will generate hundreds of millions of dollars each year in the solutions for homelessness and mental health. And they say will benefit all California tribes, including those without casinos.
And what do opponents say?
Opponents say 90% of the sports betting revenue will go to companies out of state and out of the country. And they say these measures are not a fix to homelessness, but rather a massive explosion of gaming that will directly undercut tribal sovereignty and self-sufficiency.
Can you tell us about campaign financing?
Sure. $100 million has been donated in support by the Yes on 27 Californians for Solutions to Homelessness and Mental Health Support PAC. See the top donors to the PAC on your screen. And $114.13 million has been donated in opposition by the No on 27 Californians for Tribal Sovereignty and Safe Gaming, and Yes on 26, No on 27 Coalition for Safe, Responsible Gaming Committees. The top donors are on your screen.
In conclusion, what does a yes vote mean?
A yes vote creates a constitutional amendment and statute that allows online sports betting for those 21 and over in the state of California. It allows gaming tribes and online sports betting companies partnered with gaming tribes to operate in the state. And it creates a 10% tax on revenue generated from sports betting and licensing fees.
And what does a no vote mean?
A no vote means that online sports betting in California will continue to be illegal.
Thank you very much, Jana, for the information. This has been absolutely wonderful.
Thanks, Anthony, for all the questions.
Hi, I'm Joan Wrench, and this is my cohort, Ann Wakely. We're going to talk to you today about Proposition 28. You will see it on your ballot as provides additional funding for arts and music education in public schools. It is an initiative statute. So, Ann, what is the question behind Proposition 28?
The question is, shall the state provide an additional source of annual funding for public schools, including charter schools, to supplement arts education programs for preschool and K-12 students?
What is the current situation behind Proposition 28?
Well, the California Constitution mandates that the state set aside a minimum amount each year from the general fund and local property taxes to fund public schools. In most years, the state must provide about 40% of general fund revenue to meet this requirement.
Does the state have specific requirements for art education?
Yes, the state requires schools to offer instruction in visual and performing arts in some form to students in kindergarten through grade 12. But local school districts decide on the particular courses and who will teach them. The state does not provide additional funding specifically for arts and music education.
So what does Proposition 28 propose?
Proposition 28 proposes that beginning in 2023, the state will provide supplemental funding for arts and music education for students in preschool through grade 12 in public schools, including charter schools.
And where will that money come from?
The additional money would come from the state general fund and would be equal to 1% of the minimum required amount that the school district received the year before.
And how will the funds be distributed?
The funds would be distributed according to a formula based on enrollment. Also, schools with a higher percentage of economically disadvantaged students would receive more money. 80% of this extra funding must be used to hire arts teaching staff, with an exception made for school districts and charter schools with fewer than 500 students. The remaining 20% is for materials and programs. The school principal or program director decides on how funds are spent.
Is there any reporting required?
Yes, school districts must report to the state annually and certify that the extra funding was spent on arts education.
And what are the fiscal effects?
Proposition 28 would increase state costs by about $1 billion annually beginning next year. This amount is less than 0.5% of the state's total general fund budget.
So what do supporters say about Prop 28?
Supporters say that only 1 in 5 California schools has a dedicated teacher for arts and music programs. They also say Proposition 28 will benefit all students, especially students from communities of color, who often experience a lack of access to arts and music education, and it does not raise taxes.
And what do the opponents say?
The opponents say that this will reduce flexibility in the state budget, limiting the ability to respond to future changes and fund emerging critical needs. Opponents also say that spending on California K-12 public education is going up while enrollment is going down. As a result, per student expenditures adjusted for inflation are the highest since at least 1988.
And what about campaign financing? What does that look like?
Well, the PAC Yes on 28, Californians for Arts and Music in Schools, has donated $8 million to date in support. The top donors of this PAC are displayed on your screen. At this point, no organized opposition has been declared.
In conclusion, what does a yes vote mean?
A yes vote means that the state would provide funding specifically for arts education in public schools for students in preschool and grades K through 12. This amount would be in addition to the constitutionally required public school funding.
And what does a no vote mean?
A no vote means that funding for arts education in public schools would continue to depend on state and local budget decisions.
Thank you, Anne.
Of course, Joan.
Hi, I'm Barbara Strong, and this is Carol Joy Harris. We're here to talk to you about Proposition 29. You'll see it on your ballot as requires on-site licensed medical professional at kidney dialysis clinics and establishes other state requirements. Carol Joy, what is the question behind Proposition 29?
Well, the question is, should outpatient dialysis clinics be required to have a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant on site at all hours when patients are being treated? And should they be required to provide various clinic-related information to patients and the state.
Can you tell us about the background behind Proposition 29?
Sure. About 80,000 patients in California receive dialysis services from 650 chronic dialysis clinics. Dialysis clinics are licensed by federal standards. 2 out-of-state for-profit companies, DaVita Incorporated and Fresenius Medical Care, operate almost 3/4 of the dialysis clinics in California. The remaining clinics are operated by a variety of nonprofit and for-profit entities. And currently, federal law requires clinics to report any infections related to treatment.
What is the current staffing at dialysis clinics?
All patients have their own physicians whom they must see once per month. All clinics have a medical director who is a physician on staff.
And how are insurance companies involved?
Most patients on dialysis are covered by Medicare and/or Medi-Cal, which pay a fixed rate for dialysis services. About 10% of dialysis patients are covered by group and individual health insurance plans that often pay multiple times the amounts paid by Medicare and/or Medi-Cal because their rates are negotiated with each insurance company. After a period of time, all dialysis patients are covered by Medicare.
What is Proposition 29 proposing?
Proposition 29 would require that a licensed physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant, in each case with at least 6 months of experience in kidney care, must be on site at all times when dialysis is being performed. Telehealth may be used for up to 1 year if no such person is available on site.
Anything else?
Yes, clinics could not discriminate among patients based on their source of payment and could not close or reduce hours without permission from the state. Clinics would also be required to report information about dialysis-related infections among their patients. And clinics would be required to report to patients the name of any physician with more than a 5% interest in the clinic.
And what would be the fiscal effects?
The clinics would probably have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars more annually for staff salaries. State and local governments might have to pay tens of millions of dollars more annually if clinics close and patients must go to more expensive facilities, such as emergency rooms, or if clinics negotiate higher reimbursement rates.
What do supporters say?
Supporters say requiring a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant to be present during a dangerous procedure like dialysis is common sense and a matter of patient safety. Supporters also say the big corporations operating dialysis clinics can easily make the required staffing changes and still profit hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
And what do opponents say?
Opponents say clinics already use specially trained technicians, and every patient is under the care of their own kidney doctor, so more oversight is unnecessary. Opponents also say Prop 29 would take thousands of skilled medical staff from hospitals where they're needed and place them in administrative jobs.
Can you tell us about campaign financing?
Yes. $7.9 million has been contributed in support by the Californians for Kidney Dialysis Patient Protection PAC. You can see the top donor on your screen. And $36.9 million has been contributed in opposition by the No on 29 Stop Yet Another Dangerous Dialysis PAC. Again, the top donors are on your screen.
In summary, what does a yes vote mean?
A yes vote supports this ballot initiative to require dialysis clinics to have at least one physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant while patients are being treated, report data on dialysis-related infections, and not discriminate against patients based on the source of payment for care.
And what does a no vote mean?
A no vote opposes this ballot initiative to require dialysis clinics to have at least one physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant while patients are being treated, report data on dialysis-related infections, and not discriminate against patients based on the source of payment for care.
Thank you, Carol Joy.
My pleasure, Barbara.
Hi, I'm Karen Weeks, and this is Regina Bianucci-Russ. We're here to talk to you about Proposition 30. You'll see it on your ballot as provides funding for programs to reduce air pollution and prevent wildfires by increasing tax on personal income over $2 million. Proposition 30 was put on the ballot by petition signatures and requires a majority vote for approval. So, Regina, what is the question behind Proposition 30?
Yes, Karen. The question is, should the tax rate on personal income above $2 million be increased by 1.75% and the revenue dedicated to lowering greenhouse gas emissions through zero emission vehicle and infrastructure subsidies and wildfire suppression and prevention programs?
Can you give us some background?
Sure. California is currently experiencing severe drought, increasingly devastating wildfire, and poor air quality. Gas-powered vehicles and wildfire smoke are the two largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the state.
Are there current laws addressing these situations?
Yes, state law requires California reduce its greenhouse gas levels by 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. State law also requires ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft to have 90% of their drivers using zero-emission vehicles by 2030. But zero-emission vehicles are expensive and unaffordable for many residents, and the state lacks sufficient charging stations to support increased use of these vehicles. The state recently committed to spending $10 billion over the next 5 years on zero-emission vehicles, and on average spends $2.2 to $4 billion annually on wildfire response.
How about the wildfire situation? What is the background on that?
The California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, which is CAL FIRE, is facing rising costs for its programs as fires have become increasingly catastrophic.
What does Proposition 30 propose?
Proposition 30 would increase personal income taxes by 1.75% of those individuals making over $2 million a year effective January 2023.
And how would the money generated be allocated?
20% of the funds would go to wildfire prevention and suppression programs. 45% of the funds would be allocated for incentives to purchase zero-emission vehicles, and 35% would go toward the purchase and installation of zero-emission vehicle charging stations.
Are there any other stipulations?
Yes, the proposition mandates at least half of the new funds collected for zero-emission vehicles and charging stations would go to benefit low-income and disadvantaged communities.
Would this tax be ongoing?
No, the tax increase would end on January 1, 2043, or earlier if there are 3 consecutive calendar years in which statewide greenhouse gas emissions are 80% below 1990 levels.
And what would be the fiscal effect?
The new tax would generate $3.5 billion to $5 billion annually, growing over time. That funding would support an increase in zero-emission vehicle programs by $2.8 to $4 billion annually. Additionally, the proposition would increase state funding for wildfire prevention and response by $700 million to $1 billion annually. Proposition 30 could also decrease government costs related to firefighting, cleanup, and recovery, reducing the cost of wildfire management in the future.
So, Regina, what are supporters saying?
Supporters are saying existing programs are insufficient to address the state's poor air quality, which is largely caused by vehicle exhaust and wildfire smoke. Proposition 30 would make zero-emission vehicles more affordable and fund the necessary infrastructure to support them. and existing funding for wildfire prevention and suppression are inadequate. Proposition 30 provides needed funding for firefighters and equipment.
And what are the opponents saying?
Opponents are saying the Proposition 30 tax increase is not necessary. California is already investing billions of dollars on multi-year climate programs. Proposition 30 commits money from income taxes, normally a major source of school funding, to zero emission vehicles and fire suppression interests. Rideshare companies will heavily benefit from Proposition 30 instead of having to fund these changes themselves.
Can you tell us about campaign financing?
Sure. As of September 9th, $16 million has been contributed in support of the top donor being Lyft. And in opposition, $4.3 million has been contributed. See the top donors on your screen.
In summary, what does a yes vote mean?
A yes vote means the taxpayers would pay an additional 1.75% in personal income taxes over $2 million to fund zero emission vehicle programs and wildfire response and prevention activities.
And what about a no vote?
A no vote means there would be no changes made to taxes of personal income of $2 million or above.
Thank you so much, Regina.
You're welcome, Karen.
Hi, I'm Lauren Vreeland Long, and this is Connie Williams and Bill Becker. We're here to talk to you about Proposition 31. You will see it on your ballot as referendum on a 2020 law prohibiting retail sale of certain flavored tobacco products. So Connie, what is the question behind Proposition 31?
Lauren, the question is, should the current law prohibiting the retail sale of certain flavored tobacco products be approved?
And what is Proposition 31's situation?
Senate Bill 793 was passed by the California State Legislature and signed by the governor in 2020. This law bans in-person stores and vending machines from selling most flavored tobacco products and tobacco product flavor enhancers. But Senate Bill 793 did not go into effect because a petition to demand a referendum on the law qualified for this ballot. Proposition 31 is that referendum.
And for the record, Connie, can you remind us what is a referendum?
Sure. A veto referendum is a type of citizen-initiated ballot measure that asks voters whether to uphold or to repeal a law passed by the state legislature. For Prop 31, voters are asked to either uphold the current law, which is SB 793, or to repeal that current law.
Good. Thanks. What's the Proposition 31 propose?
So Proposition 31 asks the voters to decide whether Senate Bill 793 can or cannot go into effect. So voting for Proposition 31 will allow the law to go into effect, meaning that in-person stores and vending machines cannot sell flavored tobacco products and tobacco product flavor enhancers. If the current law goes into effect, a $250 penalty will be charged for each violation. Voting against Proposition 31 will repeal that law, meaning in-person stores and vending machines can continue to sell flavored tobacco products and tobacco product flavor enhancers.
Thank you, Connie. So Bill, what is the fiscal effect of Proposition 31?
The fiscal effect will depend on the consumer response. If there is a less purchasing of tobacco products, then the tax revenues will be reduced. Proposition 31 would likely reduce state tobacco tax revenues by an amount ranging from tens of millions of dollars to around $100 million annually.
And what are supporters saying?
Supporters say voting on yes on this measure would save lives and protect young people from getting hooked on nicotine. Supporters also say Big Tobacco is using all of its resources to overturn California Senate Bill 793 in order to profit from the lethal addiction of Black and young smokers. This is the latest step in their long racist history of poisoning our communities.
And what do opponents say, Bill?
Opponents say this is ultimately an issue of personal choice and freedom. We already have strict tobacco laws, including age restrictions, which should take care of several gateway drug concerns. Opponents also say prohibition has never worked and it won't work now.
Can you tell us about campaign financing for Prop 31?
Sure. Supporters have established the Yes on Proposition 31 Committee to Protect California Kids PAC. $5.5 million has been donated to the PAC to date. The top donors to the PAC are seen on your screen. The opponents have established the No on Proposition 31, Californians Against Prohibition PAC. $21.7 million has been donated thus far. See the top donors on your screen.
Thank you, Bill. So Connie, in summary, what does a yes vote mean?
Okay, a yes vote means that you are voting to uphold or to keep the law and ban the sale of flavored tobacco products.
And a no vote?
A no vote means that you are voting to repeal the law and thus allow the sale of flavored tobacco products.
Thank you so much, Connie and Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.